I remember the exact sound of the strings that night, soft and graceful, like the sort of music meant to celebrate a perfect family, not expose the fracture lines running through ours. I arrived at the Duke Mansion in Charlotte with my shoulders square and my hair pinned neat, my navy dress simple in a room obsessed with shine. My pearl earrings belonged to my mother, and whenever the lights caught them, I felt her there, steadying me the way she always tried to before she could not anymore. I walked through the foyer, and the air smelled like roses and vanilla frosting chandeliers, scattering light across sequined gowns, tuxedos, designer shoes. A wall of photographers stood ready to worship the next Monroe family milestone. This was Chloe's night, or rather my father's show, and the guests turned like a school of fish quick to follow his lead. They loved him. They adored his money, his charm, his polished promises. I heard a cousin murmur that I looked tired, though what she meant was I looked independent, unsoftened by luxury, ungrateful for not floating when I was expected to sink. I smiled anyway. I learned young that silence protects you more than applause ever could. Then Chloe entered like a crowned fairy tale pink tulle pouring behind her diamond tiara, sparkling lips glossed to perfection. 16 and already certain the world was hers. She saw me smirked, then looked past me like I was an employee who missed her cue. My father held her arm, proud and powerful, greeting every guest as if they owed him their success. His smile stretched when he spotted me, but it never touched his eyes. He leaned in just enough and whispered that I did well to arrive on time, as though my life outside this mansion was a hobby he allowed. People clinked glasses, waiters glided by with champagne. And somewhere behind the chatter, I heard that old phrase from a relative: you should help family Avery, you never know when you will need them. The irony tasted bitter. The music paused and lights rose toward the stage. My father tapped the microphone and his voice filled the room, smooth and commanding. He spoke of legacy love, family loyalty, his favorite word. I stood still. I knew his tone. Something was coming. Then he announced a special gift for Chloe, and guests leaned forward in anticipation. My stomach tightened because I saw the spark in his eyes, the one he had when he decided outcomes before anyone else understood the rules. He said he wanted to celebrate the next chapter of Chloe's life with something meaningful, something symbolic of family unity. He paused for effect, the room's silent breath held. Then he declared that I would be gifting Chloe my penthouse, the home I bought, designed and built from the inside out, tile by tile, paycheck by paycheck, sweat earned, not given. Gasps fluttered across the hall. I saw mouths fall open like slow-motion petals. Chloe's smile widened. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed calm, anchored by memory and steel. I said no. That is my home. I earned it. The room froze. It felt like the chandeliers dimmed just to hear us. Chloe blinked fast, disbelief twisting into outrage. My father's jaw flexed. He stepped toward me, his smile cracking like thin ice. He whispered, "You will not embarrass me here." I lifted my chin. Love is not ownership. I did not raise my voice. I did not shake. Something inside me had already decided long before this night. Chloe shouted that I was selfish, and someone near the stage murmured ungrateful. My father closed the distance. His hand pushed hard at my shoulder, sudden and sharp. The marble column met my head in a burst of white, not pain at first, just ringing like church bells underwater. The room blurred. Conversations died. A camera flash went off, and I saw a teenage guest filming, uncertain, scared, curious. My knees weakened, the world tilting as sound rushed back. Gasps, and a single glass shattering somewhere to my right. Paramedics appeared, moving with practiced urgency, and I lay still, the ceiling turning into streaks of gold and shadow. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I saw Chloe staring, confusion mixing with fear. Not for me, but for the spotlight shifting. My father stood rigid, his face pale beneath the weight of eyes, whispers spreading like wildfire. I turned my head slightly, breath thin but steady. Record everything I whispered. Someone near me trembled, and I saw a phone rise again. The ambulance doors closed, and I felt the world narrow to the pulse in my temple, the cold air, the taste of truth in my mouth. Tell me, have you ever been punished just for saying no to family? I grew up in a quiet neighborhood outside Charlotte, the kind where lawns stayed trimmed and front porches carried rocking chairs like trophies of Southern discipline. In the late 1990s, our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a two-story brick home with white columns my father insisted made us look refined. He liked things that signaled power even before he fully had it. Back then, he was still climbing not yet the polished developer with magazine features and charitable gala invitations, but the hunger was already there in his posture and in the sharp way he spoke when anyone challenged him. My mother tried to soften the world for me, but softness was a language he did not understand. I remember Saturday mornings when she would hum while making pancakes, and I would watch the steam curl from the griddle, feeling safe in those brief hours before my father woke and started inspecting, correcting, directing. He believed children should be useful and that praise made people weak. If I earned straight A's, he would nod and ask why I did not take on extra credit. If I cleaned the kitchen, he would inspect corners and baseboards, pointing to one crumb like a courtroom exhibit proving failure. My mother whispered once that he confused control with love. She said it in the laundry room while folding towels, voice low, eyes tired. I asked if she was okay, and she kissed my forehead, telling me that I was her peace. But peace is fragile in a house ruled by image. Eventually, the marriage cracked, not with screaming, but with silence and absence. She left when I was around 15, and though people whispered that she abandoned me, I knew she left to survive. The door shut behind her and the air shifted. My father did not cry. He simply poured a drink, straightened his tie, and told me that family loyalty means sacrifice. He loved that phrase, used it like scripture. To him, loyalty meant obedience and sacrifice meant silence. When Chloe arrived shortly afterward, everything in our home rearranged itself. She was his restart, his proof that he could build a perfect family after the first one disappointed him. I became the shadow version of a parent, a teenager warming bottles, rocking a baby in the dim light of 3 a.m. learning recipes and carpool routes, not because I chose to, but because he decided I should. If I hesitated, he reminded me that real families step up. Meanwhile, he paraded Chloe like a symbol of redemption. She had bows bigger than her head, tiny designer shoes, portraits taken every month to show her growth like she was a business asset. People cooed at her and called her his little princess, and they never looked long enough at me to see the exhaustion under my eyes or the textbooks open beside bottles of formula. I did my homework at the kitchen counter while bouncing her in a sling, memorizing anatomy terms while burping her over my shoulder, learning early that my needs were optional. At school, teachers praised my grades but wondered why I avoided after-school clubs, never knowing that I had to rush home to babysit because he believed children of privilege must contribute. He framed it as responsibility, but responsibility without choice is another form of chains. My friends faded as weekends disappeared into grocery runs and toddler tantrums. I held Chloe's tiny hands when she learned to walk, brushed her hair before preschool tied ribbons in it before kindergarten. I packed lunches, read bedtime stories, learned which stuffed animal soothed her nightmares. There was sweetness in those moments, but sweetness burdened by duty, and when she cried for me instead of him, he looked almost offended, as though affection had chosen the wrong parent. He rewarded her for charm and punished me for independence. If I questioned a rule, he reminded me that he provided everything. If I dared mention college dreams, he smirked and asked who would help at home. So I tucked my ambitions into a mental drawer and learned patience the way some children learn piano. Over time, Chloe absorbed his values without even noticing. She saw attention given freely to her and labor extracted from me, and like many children, she accepted the world she was handed. By middle school, she already expected applause for arriving in a room and pouted when anything belonged to someone else. Meanwhile, my father sharpened his image in the community, sponsoring events, cultivating business allies, presenting himself as a devoted parent, raising 2 lovely daughters. I stood beside him in photos, a quiet proof of his narrative. The neighbors never saw him instruct me to redo chores until my hands ached or dismiss my accomplishments as expected. They saw a successful man guiding a responsible girl and spoiling a younger one. And I learned something without meaning to. I learned that families can shape themselves around one person's ego and call it tradition. I learned that silence can be mistaken for harmony. I learned that duty can disguise itself as love. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of carrying other people's expectations, I learned to wait for the moment I could build a life where my worth was not measured by obedience. College was not an escape. At first, it was a breath taken underwater, a momentary rise to the surface before real air returned. When I enrolled at UNC Charlotte, I walked onto campus carrying more responsibility than luggage. I declared a double major in finance and architecture, not because someone encouraged me, but because I needed both practicality and creation. Finance would give me security. Architecture would give me soul. My father did not attend move-in day. He called that morning and said that self-sufficiency builds character. I hung up and carried my boxes alone, feeling equal parts abandoned and liberated. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at the campus library, shelving books in quiet aisles that smelled like paper and ambition, and another at a small cafe near South End, pouring coffee for tech interns and young professionals who seemed to float through life without weight. I paid tuition with scholarships and hours stretched long. When classmates breezed into lectures holding lattes they did not pay for, I sat in the back highlighting chapters and inhaling knowledge like oxygen. I ate peanut butter sandwiches when money tightened, and sometimes I studied in my car because the dorm noise felt heavier than solitude. But I learned. I built skills brick by brick the way others inherited their futures whole. Architecture studios meant late nights bent over drafting tables, skin smeared with graphite tracing angles until my wrist ached. Finance classes meant spreadsheets, case studies, and learning how markets move like tides, sometimes brutal, sometimes generous. I discovered that discipline is a language, and I was fluent. In my junior year, I landed an internship in New York City at a small but respected development firm in Midtown. It was the first time I stepped into a world that resembled my father's ambitions, except here, the power was earned, not demanded. I worked in a glass office that reflected the Chrysler Building hum of traffic below the city pulsing like a heartbeat. My mornings started with subway rides and meetings where I took notes like they were scripture. I studied materials, budgets, zoning quirks, and human behavior, realizing that buildings are autobiographies in concrete and steel. Some rise with grace, others crumble under ego. My father called once that summer. He asked how things were going and then pivoted to Chloe's horseback lessons. I told him about the firm's project designing sustainable housing in Brooklyn. He paused and asked whether my long hours meant I was becoming neglectful of family duties. The line buzzed in my ear, and I replied carefully that growth sometimes requires distance. He said, "Loyalty never does." I ended the call quietly, looking at the skyline and knowing for the first time with certainty that my life was diverging from his script. My supervisors noticed my focus and extended my internship. I stayed on through the fall, saving every paycheck, living in a tiny shared apartment in Queens where the heat rattled and the floors creaked, but the independence felt like luxury. I walked across the Brooklyn Bridge on weekends, notebook in hand, sketching arches, watching sunlight fall across stone, imagining a life where what I built could not be claimed by someone else. When graduation approached, I returned to Charlotte not because I wanted to go back, but because I needed a starting point I could afford. New York was a dream, but dreams require foundations. I worked for a mid-size real estate firm during the day and took on freelance drafting work at night. Slowly, money accumulated quiet and steady, and then, one afternoon, I found it. A listing for a rundown penthouse near Uptown, water stains on ceilings dated fixtures, a relic waiting for someone to believe in it. Friends told me it was too ambitious. I saw possibility. I bought it with savings loans and more grit than caution. I spent evenings tearing up old carpet, replacing tiles, sanding cabinets until my arms trembled. I learned how to patch drywall from YouTube videos and how to tile a bathroom floor by failing twice before getting it right. I painted walls the color of calm mornings and installed light fixtures that cast warm gold across midnight hardwood. Every tile held sweat. Every screw held intention. Alone on the balcony at night, city lights blinking below, I whispered to myself, every tile, every brick, I earned it. It was not just a home, it was proof. Proof I could exist beyond the Monroe narrative. Proof that work can build dignity. Proof that independence is not defiance, but survival. When it was finished, the space felt alive, not glamorous in the magazine sense, but grounded, earned, sacred. I hosted my first dinner there with thrift store plates and fresh flowers, and when laughter echoed off the exposed brick, I felt roots growing for the first time. My father visited once. He walked through the space, silent eyes scanning like an appraiser. He stood on the balcony, took in the skyline, and said nothing for a long time. Finally, he turned to me and said, "It is still family property, if you are family." The sentence fell like cold rain. He did not congratulate. He did not admire. He claimed, but I did not flinch. I looked at the floor we leveled with our own hands, the walls painted with late nights, the windows cleaned with early mornings, and I knew a truth he did not. Homes are not inherited by demand. They are built by devotion. And though he tried to wrap my success in his old net of loyalty and sacrifice, I had already learned that love without autonomy is simply possession. In that moment, the distance between us crystallized. I nodded politely, letting silence answer, and when he left, I locked the door behind him, feeling a click that sounded like freedom. The first tremor arrived months before the night everything cracked. It came disguised as excitement wrapped in pastel mood boards and glossy venue brochures sprawled across my father's dining table. Chloe had announced that her Sweet 16 would not be just a party, but a milestone, a spectacle, a crowning. Those were her words. Crowning. She stood in the kitchen one afternoon, swirling a sparkling water in a crystal glass, 15 going on Monarch, talking about floral walls and custom invitations like she was planning a royal banquet. My father sat beside her, nodding approvingly, jotting notes as if strategizing a business expansion. They spoke a language of luxury together, fluent in entitlement and aspiration. I listened from the doorway, arms crossed loosely, smiling when she looked my way but keeping a cautious distance. Then my father asked casually whether I thought Chloe should have a signature entrance moment, the kind where the lights dim and all cameras rise. I answered neutrally that it was her choice. He studied me for a beat too long, the calculation subtle but unmistakable. A week later, the first hint dropped. I received a call from one of my aunts, her voice warm in that syrupy southern way that feels like a hug until the needle pricks. She said the family was buzzing about how special this event would be and how proud we all should be. Then she said it would be such a meaningful gesture if I gifted something memorable, something symbolic. She paused to let the implication settle, sweetness turning sticky. I thanked her politely and changed the subject, but inside, something tightened. A seed of suspicion had sprouted. Soon, more hints arrived. Little comments dropped like petals masking thorns. "Your sister looks up to you so much. She deserves to feel celebrated. You are in such a fortunate season. Sharing is how families stay strong." The chorus grew louder, a rehearsed choir repeating loyalty in different keys. My father never asked directly at first. He suggested. He floated ideas. He said things like Chloe's future deserves a beautiful start, and family tradition means building each other up. I recognized the rhythm. He always softened coercion before tightening it. A performance of generosity preceding the demand. Then one evening, Chloe called me unexpectedly. She rarely called unless she needed something, and her voice carried the breathless enthusiasm she used when expecting compliance. She said she and her friends were planning mood inspiration for her future life and thought it would be fun if her interior decorators could swing by my penthouse to see the space. She said it like it was harmless casual, like my home was a showroom she could borrow for a fantasy. I felt the air still. My grip on the phone tightened. I told her kindly that my home was not available for that. Silence followed just long enough to reveal offense. She asked why not, as if no answer could justify refusal. I repeated myself. She exhaled sharply, surprised. "Entitlement does not handle boundaries well." Then she said, "Dad thinks it would be special." Special. That word again. A soft cloak for expectation. I reiterated no, and she hung up with a clipped goodnight. The tension did not break. It multiplied. At Sunday dinner that week, my father mentioned that Chloe was hurt. I was not showing enthusiasm. I calmly replied that I did not owe my home or my time to party planning. He set down his fork, posture, stiff eyes narrowing just slightly. He said, "Family support is not optional, Avery." I replied that respect is not optional either. The table quieted. Even the clink of plates seemed to pause. He did not argue then. He waited. That was his tactic always. Apply pressure slowly until cracks appear. But I did not crack. I went home afterward and ran my fingers along the brick wall in my living room, feeling the roughness beneath the paint. I reminded myself that everything here was earned, not granted. After that, the whispers grew louder. Relatives slipped comments at gatherings. Chloe pouted dramatically in group chats. My father's tone hardened. One afternoon, he arrived unannounced, walked through my home as if inspecting a property he owned, and then said that real families think of each other first. I looked him in the eye and answered that real love does not demand sacrifice without consent. His expression shifted just for a second. He saw something he had not expected. A woman, not a daughter. A boundary, not a plea. He left without finishing his coffee. That night, I opened my journal, the one with pages filled over years, with truths I could not speak aloud. I wrote that fear is not weakness but information. I wrote that comfort is not peace. I wrote that I could feel a storm forming, but storms can clear skies too. I wrote my mother's phrase, "Love is not control," and then my own variation, "Love is not ownership." And somewhere between pen strokes, I realized I was not afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing myself if I continued giving him space to define my life. Over the next weeks, I indulged in small rebellions. I ignored comments about generosity. I declined invitations designed to corner me. I practiced my refusal in the mirror, quiet but firm. No tremble, no apology. When Chloe sent a mood board that included photos of spaces suspiciously similar to mine, I did not respond. When an aunt suggested in front of others that my penthouse would make the sweetest surprise, I smiled and changed the subject to weather. Boundaries spoken softly but held firmly can feel louder than shouting. Then came the final warning sign. My father texted saying there would be an announcement at the party about family unity. He suggested I look beautiful and stay composed because eyes would be on me. I sat with my phone in my hand, pulse steady, not frantic. I felt something I had never felt before in his presence. Detachment. His words no longer dictated my worth. I closed my journal that night after writing one sentence that felt like prophecy. I will not belong to anyone's story but my own. And as the Sweet 16 approached, as floral arches were ordered and seating charts finalized as whispers twined themselves through phone calls and brunch tables, I found an unexpected calm. Sometimes people believe they are tightening control when in truth they are sharpening resolve. This time, I was not the obedient daughter smoothing chaos. I was the quiet storm on the horizon that no one noticed until the wind shifted. The 316 unfolded like a scene engineered to impress the kind of Southern luxury that feels less like celebration and more like performance. The Duke Mansion glowed under warm evening lights, chandeliers catching crystal edges like captured stars, manicured gardens trimmed with precision, and guests stepping out of black vehicles with practiced poise. Women in silk gowns and men in tailored suits walked across marble floors polished to a mirror shine the air scented with peonies and something expensive I could not name. A violin quartet played near a floral arch bursting with pale pink roses, each bloom carefully placed to project extravagance. I entered quietly, clutching my mother's bracelet on my wrist like a talisman, steadying myself as if I were stepping into an arena, not a party. The first eyes turned toward me before I crossed the threshold. They swept over my simple but elegant dress, my hair pinned with understated grace. A cousin whispered near the champagne fountain that I always chose dignity over glamour, and another replied that maybe I had nothing else to choose. Their voices carried just enough to sting, but not enough to be confronted. That was the art of genteel cruelty, polite enough to be denied, sharp enough to wound. I walked with slow calm, refusing to let their glances alter my breath. Across the ballroom, Chloe held court like a coronated princess flanked by friends in matching pastel dresses, tiara shimmering under stage lights. She laughed loudly at something and then spotted me. Her face lit with a sort of triumphant glitter, not joy, but possession, as if my attendance were a trophy she had earned. She spun toward a cluster of girls and I caught the tail end of her comment. Something about how amazing the views from her future penthouse parties would be. A few girls squealed with admiration. One said I had good taste, so she was lucky. My throat tightened, heat rising under my skin, but I exhaled slowly and kept walking. It felt like moving through honey thick and heavy each step, a reminder that I was an outsider in a narrative written by someone else. My father approached from across the room with confident strides, wearing a bespoke suit smile like polished steel. He greeted guests with a handshake that conveyed ownership of the moment. When he reached me, his charm slipped into something colder, a private mask reserved for when he believed the world owed him obedience. He ushered me toward a quiet corner near the staircase. Posture rigid, jaw tense beneath civility. He spoke softly enough that no one else could hear, but his tone sharp as glass. He said there would be a special announcement soon, and he expected me to sign a gift statement to make it official before he spoke. He gestured toward a neatly folded paper tucked into his jacket like a secret he never doubted would unfold exactly as he planned. My heart thudded once hard, then steadied. I met his eyes and replied evenly that I would not sign anything. His expression faltered for a fraction of a second, shock flickering like a candle caught in wind. Then he leaned in closer and said, "Not to make a scene, not here, not tonight." His voice, smooth to others, carried a warning I knew well. I repeated my refusal quieter but firmer, my spine straight as the marble column beside us. His jaw clenched and his smile returned, forced into position, like a mask held by invisible tape. He hissed that I would do this because our family image depended on it. That phrase, family image, landed like a stone on my chest. I told him calmly that my home was not a prop for his pride. He looked at me, truly looked as if seeing for the first time the adult standing where he still imagined a compliant child. He told me not to embarrass us and that I would do this. His certainty cracked slightly when I did not flinch. That was when the whispers began swirling near us like drifting perfume. A pair of ants moved past, glancing with sympathetic smiles that were not sympathy at all, but curiosity sharpened by judgment. Someone nearby murmured that I might be jealous. Chloe, meanwhile, basked in attention near the stage, gesturing grandly while a photographer captured her every angle. Her dress glittered like spun sugar, and she posed with practiced ease, chin-lifted eyes bright, performing confidence she had never been forced to earn. An MC tested the microphone and lights dimmed briefly, then brightened again, signaling that formalities would soon begin. People adjusted their jackets, smoothed dresses, lifted glasses. I could feel the night tipping toward something irreversible, and the air tightened, expectation heavy as humidity before a storm. My father placed one hand lightly on my upper arm, a motion disguised as affection, but applied with enough pressure to convey dominance, and told me once more that I would sign before he went on stage. I gently pulled my arm free and met his stare with a steadiness that made his eyes harden. His breath hitched the smallest tremor of disbelief. He stepped closer, voice low, like containment struggling against eruption, saying that I had no idea what I was risking. I replied that losing myself was a risk I would not take again. He opened his mouth to retort, but the band shifted to a brighter melody and the MC called for guests to gather. Chloe squealed and clapped the sound sugary and sharp, and guests flocked toward the stage. My father straightened his jacket, smoothing his sleeves as though adjusting armor, then gave me one last look, a mix of warning and disbelief, before walking forward to play his role. I remained near the staircase, breath steady, heart beating with quiet defiance. I touched my mother's bracelet fingers, tracing the delicate metal, and whispered internally that love is not ownership. The ballroom shimmered with applause as Chloe took her place under the spotlight, and I watched the golden haze around her. It struck me then that wealth can shine so brightly it blinds even those holding it. The photographer moved through the crowd, capturing admiration on polished faces. Servers carried trays of sparkling drinks, and someone near me murmured that it was a perfect night. Perfect for whom I wondered. The stage lights cast long shadows across the floor, and in those shadows I felt a familiar ache, a childhood echo reminding me of how control often hides behind celebration. Yet underneath that ache thrummed a new calm. I knew I was standing on the edge of a line, drawn long ago, finally choosing not to cross into submission, but to anchor myself where dignity lived. The music swelled, applause rose, and somewhere in the glitter and noise, a truth settled into my bones. This time I would not give what was demanded simply because it was demanded. Some debts are imagined, some loyalty is weaponized, and some moments decide who we become. The night felt beautiful and brutal all at once. A chandelier dream laced with warning, and I stood at the heart of it ready steady, refusing quietly in a room that had never expected me to resist. The lights dimmed just enough to make the chandeliers glow like frozen stars, and a hush rolled through the ballroom as my father stepped up to the microphone, the master of ceremonies in his favorite theater, the world always his stage. He smiled that polished smile, the one that convinced bankers and board members and church committees that he was a pillar of Southern virtue, and guests leaned in as though wisdom would spill from his lips. He spoke of milestones and family legacy and how Chloe represented the future, how love was measured by sacrifice, and how tonight was not only a celebration but a testament to unity. His cadence rose and fell with calculated warmth, each pause deliberate, each glance toward the crowd choreographed. I stood at the edge of the stage stairs, hands clasped loosely, trying to focus on the quiet steadiness of my breathing. My mother's bracelet felt cool against my wrist, a reminder of gentler truths. Then his tone shifted. He spoke about gifts that carry meaning beyond material worth, and how family support is the foundation on which dreams are built. The audience nodded, a sea of approving faces bathed in soft golden light. He turned toward me and extended one hand in a gesture that looked tender from afar, but felt like a command from up close. He called my name, inviting me to join him. Conversations stilled, cameras lifted. I stepped forward slowly, heartbeat calm, but senses razor sharp. He wrapped an arm lightly around my shoulders for the crowd to see and announced that tonight Chloe would receive more than a party. She would receive a symbol of family love and devotion, a home to begin her next chapter. He invited applause, and it erupted confused cheers, filling the room before meaning fully landed. Then he said it. Avery will be gifting Chloe her penthouse. The words fell like glass shattering in slow motion. Gasps rippled. Someone clapped uncertainly, then stopped. Chloe beamed, eyes shining with triumphant certainty like a princess being crowned. My father looked down at me, expecting compliance, as though decades of discipline would deliver obedience on cue. I inhaled through my nose, slow and steady, tilting my chin slightly upward. The microphone hovered inches from us, and time felt suspended. Breath held across the room. I spoke without raising my voice, without shaking, without apology. My home is not a gift. It is my life's work. The ballroom froze silence thick enough to taste. A few cameras zoomed closer. My father blinked once, shock slicing through his mask before he caught himself. Chloe let out a sound halfway between disbelief and fury, her face flushing red under stage lights. She stomped forward, grabbed a silver cake server from the table beside her, and flung it hard across the stage. It clanged on the polished floor like a metallic scream, spinning before coming to a stop near the DJ booth. A murmur rippled across the room. A woman near the front whispered ungrateful, as though refusing to surrender your own home made you morally flawed. My father's fingers tightened on my shoulder, a grip disguised as support but laced with command. His voice dropped low words aimed only at me, though the microphone almost caught them. Do not do this, Avery. You will not embarrass us. I looked straight ahead, held his gaze, and repeated softly enough for only him to hear, but firmly enough to be still. I am not signing anything. His jaw-flexed eyes narrowing, breath sharpening. Chloe began crying angry tears, mascara smudging as her friends hovered confused and unsure whether to comfort her or stay back from the spectacle unraveling. Someone whispered that I must be jealous. Another murmured that I was ruining the night, and yet beneath that noise I could hear something else. A shift, a fracture, a truth escaping years of control. My father's charming veneer cracked. The corners of his mouth twitched as he tried to pull his smile back into place for the crowd, but his eyes betrayed him. And then it happened quickly, not dramatic in appearance, but seismic in intention. He lunged forward just slightly, hand pressing hard against my shoulder, pushing. My balance tipped heel, sliding on the smooth surface, and my temple struck the edge of a decorative column. Not a roar, not a blow, just a forceful shove, disguised as an accident to anyone who needed to believe he was incapable of harm. A sharp ringing filled my ears. The room blurred, people gasping, some stepping back, as though shock might be contagious. My hand flew instinctively to steady myself, yet the momentum had already done its work. I felt the world lurch sideways, sound thick like underwater echoes. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted, "Call someone," and a phone was already raised recording. I tasted a hint of copper, but no blood dripped, only the dull throb of pain spreading like slow wildfire behind my eyes. Chloe's breath hitched in disbelief, tears mixing with panic. Now, not anger, not understanding yet that her perfect night had shifted into something irrevocable. I straightened slowly, a tremor running through my fingers that I suppressed with practiced restraint. My father reached to grip my arm again, perhaps to steady the illusion or regain control, but I pulled away, planting my feet with quiet resolve. People crowded forward, then stopped, torn between curiosity and propriety. The music had cut off abruptly, leaving a hollow echo. I pressed my palm to my temple and inhaled, grounding myself, feeling the cool weight of my bracelet as though my mother's steadiness flowed through the metal. I turned slightly toward the nearest camera voice, thin but steady words measured even through ringing ears. "My home is mine. I will not be forced." A hush fell again, heavier than the first. In that quiet, the shape of truth became undeniable. My father's composure shattered, for a flicker eyes wide, not with guilt, but with fury at losing control in public. A choice lived between us then, a line drawn sharp as glass. He tried to place a guiding hand on my back to usher me off stage for appearances, for narrative, for power, but the EMTs entered the ballroom with brisk steps, alerted by someone who had seen enough. Their arrival pierced the illusion like sunlight through fog. My father stepped back, face pale, beneath the heat of scrutiny. Cameras kept rolling, phones, lifted eyes wide, whispers racing faster than reason. As the EMT reached for my arm, I lifted my head and said the only words that mattered in that moment. I said no. Not whispering, not shaking, not yielding. No to obedience, no to erasure, no to being handed off like property disguised as affection. And as they escorted me down the steps, the crowd parted like a sea, unsure which shore to stand on. My father called my name, but his voice sounded distant, hollow. I walked forward, spine straight, vision hazy, but purpose sharp. Sometimes a single word holds years inside it. Sometimes no is not refusal, but rebirth. The sirens blurred into the pulse behind my temples, steady and distant, as if the world outside the ambulance had faded into tunnels of flashing red and white. Charlotte's night air rushed past the open rear doors before they closed, sealing me inside the narrow space that smelled faintly of antiseptic and metal. The paramedic securing the strap across my chest spoke calmly, asking questions I heard, like echoes through water. Did I lose consciousness? Any nausea? Can I track his finger? I answered with the clipped clarity of someone trained by a lifetime of composure to perform okay, even when the ground beneath her shifted. My head throbbed, each heartbeat a dull flare of heat behind my eyes. I pressed my fingertips to my temple, feeling the tender spot forming, not dramatic, not catastrophic, but undeniably real. Outside the tinted window, I saw shadows gathering dresses, pooling like pastel smoke on marble phones, glowing in a forest of confronting screens. A world built on image, suddenly forced to look at truth. The ambulance lurched forward, and I inhaled slowly, letting the cold air from the vent wash across my face. The paramedic asked again if I was dizzy, and I nodded only once. He wrote something on a clipboard. Another light passed over my eyes. He told me to breathe evenly, and I almost laughed, not from humor, but from recognition. Control. Even here, the body demanded it. The hospital lights were harsher, sterile, blinding, replacing chandeliers with fluorescence. I was wheeled past double doors and down a corridor lined with curtained bays. Nurses murmured, machines beeped, and somewhere someone cried softly. The world no longer smelled like roses and champagne. It smelled like saline and reality. They guided me behind a curtain, slid the stretcher against a gurney, and helped me sit upright. The sudden shift made the room tilt, and I steadied myself against the rail. A nurse with warm eyes and a gentle efficiency placed an ice pack in my hand. She asked what happened. The word "father" caught in my throat before I could push it out. She did not press. She adjusted the IV line and touched my shoulder in a way that felt human, not clinical. A doctor arrived, middle-aged, steady presence glasses perched low as he examined the forming bruise. He asked questions, checked my vision again, pressed lightly along my hairline. When I winced, he paused and wrote, "Documenting. Careful. Thorough." He asked who brought me. I said paramedics from a family event. I did not elaborate. He studied me for a beat, then said calmly that head trauma must be taken seriously and that documentation would be precise. Something in the way he said precise settled deep inside me. Not pity, not intrusion, simply truth in recordable form. After he left, the nurse returned to adjust the curtain. It swayed slightly and she leaned in, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You do not have to protect him." The air stilled. I blinked once, feeling something inside me shift like a tectonic plate long held in place. She did not say, "Father." She did not need to. The bruise spoke, and the fear and the silence I had worn my whole life like invisible armor. I swallowed and nodded once, almost imperceptible, as though acknowledging a contract with myself more than with her. My phone buzzed on the metal tray beside the bed screen, lighting up with notifications flooding in. At first, I thought they were messages from family. Then I saw unfamiliar names, reposts, mentions, a video thumbnail from the ballroom, shaky, chaotic, but clear enough. The shove, the stumble, the impact, my father moving toward me. Gasps, someone shouting, "Call someone." A teen's voice saying, "Is she okay?" The clip ended abruptly, but the caption burned bright. "When saying no gets you hurt." Millions of eyes had not seen it yet, only hundreds. But hundreds become thousands in the digital age faster than grief can register. I set the phone down gently, pulse steadying into something sharper than shock. Purpose, not revenge. Not yet, just truth-breaking surface like a breath finally taken. A nurse hung a fluid bag on the pole and inserted an IV into my arm. Cool sensation spread up my vein, soothing and strange. I exhaled and whispered almost without realizing it, "No one gets to take what you built." A volunteer in the hallway glanced in as if catching a ghost of meaning. The nurse looked at me again, eyes soft and fierce at once, like someone who had seen too many women apologize for bruises earned through loyalty. A police officer arrived at the curtain entrance. His voice was courteous but firm. He asked if he could speak with me. I nodded, sitting straighter, though my head buzzed. He stepped closer, notebook ready, posture respectful. He asked how I sustained the injury. I hesitated, not because I did not know the truth, but because telling it felt like stepping across a threshold I could never step back from. The officer waited without push, without assumption. The nurse remained silent, supportive, as if she knew silence does not protect the right person. I drew a slow breath and said I was pushed. The officer wrote. He asked by whom. I paused again. "My father." The words tasted foreign and familiar all at once, like admitting something I had rehearsed in private but never dared speak aloud. The officer asked if I wished to file a formal report. The room felt suddenly small curtain walls closing in like the walls of my childhood home. Filing would mean choosing myself over him publicly. It would mean ending the illusion he crafted. It would mean honesty with consequences. My vision blurred for a moment, whether from tears or concussion, I was not sure, then cleared. The nurse placed a steady hand near mine, not touching but offering presence. My mother's bracelet gleamed faintly in the fluorescent light, a memory pulsing with each heartbeat. Love is not ownership. I lifted my chin, felt the weight of years behind that movement, and answered, "Yes, I want to make a statement." The officer nodded, respectful, ready. Something inside me unlocked, quiet but permanent, like a door clicking open to a world I never dared walk toward. I did not feel triumphant. I felt steady, in control of my voice for the first time, not just in action, but in declaration. As the officer documented my statement, the room remained still except for the soft hum of monitors and occasional footsteps beyond the curtain. I breathed through each question, each answer, laying one brick in a foundation that felt new yet long overdue. When he finished, he thanked me for my courage. Courage felt like too grand a word. I had simply stopped taking responsibility for protecting someone who never protected me. When he left, the nurse adjusted the blanket over my lap and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head gently. She smiled, quiet pride in her expression, and whispered again, "Just for me, you are not alone." Phones continued buzzing, and somewhere in the digital ether, a shaky video gathered momentum, truth spreading like dawn across a horizon that had been too dark for too long. In that narrow ER bay with a curtain for a door and fluorescent lights humming above, I closed my eyes not to escape, but to rest in the first real moment of freedom I had known. The morning after the party did not begin with sunlight. It began with vibration. My phone buzzed against the bedside tray again and again, small persistent tremors that stirred me from the medicated haze of the hospital night. At first, I assumed family group chats were unraveling, demanding explanations, rehearsing the familiar chorus of loyalty and image. But when I reached for the phone, my fingers unsteady from IV stiffness, the screen told a different story. 37 missed calls, hundreds of notifications, comments, mentions, messages from strangers. The shaky video from the ballroom had found oxygen and ignited. A teen guest had posted it on TikTok with simple words beneath it. "When saying no gets you hurt." By dawn, it had cleared hundreds of thousands of views. By mid-morning, millions. The comments poured like floodwater. Who pushes their own daughter? She earned that home. No means no, even in families. The algorithm did not pause to be polite. It recognized injustice and fed it to the world. Instagram Reels picked it up next. Then YouTube Shorts. On each platform, voices rose outraged, protective, disbelieving. The hashtags formed almost organically, as though written by a collective conscience. Protect women. Family is earned. Some comments cut sharp through the noise. A father should be proud, not entitled. This is why boundaries matter. Silence does not equal consent. My breath caught reading those words because they echoed truths I had whispered only to myself until now. Then a journalist reached out from a regional news outlet in Charlotte. Then another from Atlanta. Then a national morning show producer left a voicemail. My screen filled faster than I could swipe. Support flowed in waves, comments arriving from mothers, daughters, fathers, people who had once swallowed pain for the sake of harmony. I saw stories in my inbox like tiny lanterns floating across a dark lake. I stayed because I didn't want to break the family, but I broke anyway. You gave me courage to leave my situation. I thought I was alone. Thank you for showing us we are not crazy for wanting autonomy. The human heart hears truth even when spoken softly. Mine had spoken softly for years. Now the world amplified it. Meanwhile, my father's silence grew louder than any statement could. At first, he tried to contain it. A family misunderstanding, a private matter. But the clip did not show misunderstanding. It showed contact. It showed force. It showed me steady, not hysterical, not dramatic, simply refusing. Momentum accelerated. A former employee of my father's company commented on the viral post about his temper in meetings, the way he belittled staff, the pressure to perform loyalty. Another anonymous account posted an email screenshot hinting at questionable real estate tactics. Patterns emerged like cracks in marble. It no longer looked like a moment. It looked like a history. Chloe went silent online, her Instagram comments flooded with people asking why she thought she deserved a home she did not earn. Even those sympathetic to her youth could not ignore the entitlement dripping from her public persona. Her fan-style posts from the party vanished. Her story bubble went dark. The Monroe family brand machine sputtered, and just like that, power shifted. Not violently, not theatrically, but with a collective exhale from strangers refusing to look away. My father's colleagues retreated, public figures distanced themselves. Charity boards removed his name from event invitations. Silence. No statement. No apology. Just absence where authority once lived. My phone rang again, and a producer from a national news network introduced herself gently, saying she understood if I did not want to speak, but if I did, they would protect my narrative. I told her I needed time. I was not interested in spectacle. I was interested in truth. And truth does not need a spotlight, only space. I closed my phone and set it aside, letting my body rest against the hospital pillow drip steady beeping monitors like soft punctuation. Nurses moved in and out, checking vitals, offering warm blankets, encouraging sips of water. One nurse paused longer than the others. She said she saw the video and wanted me to know I handled myself with grace. Grace. The word felt powerful in its simplicity. Grace is strength without cruelty. It is dignity without noise. Later that afternoon, while hospital lunch trays clattered and machines hummed, the officer returned with follow-up questions and confirmed that my father had been served a no-contact notice pending investigation. Hearing it spoken aloud did not feel triumphant. It felt necessary, like winter clearing branches so spring has room to grow. Then my phone buzzed again, this time from an unexpected source. A message request from someone I had not spoken to since college. She wrote that she remembered me pulling double shifts and studying until my eyes burned, and how seeing me stand firm reminded her that work matters, independence matters, boundaries matter. That message stayed with me longer than the headlines. Fame or sympathy was never the point. The point was sovereignty over my own life. As the afternoon deepened, the digital vortex only intensified. Influencers stitched the clip, speaking to camera with passionate clarity. One said, "This is why women need financial independence." Another said, "Families can be the first battleground, and silence is how cycles survive." Attorneys weighed in about property rights and coercion. Therapists posted about emotional manipulation. Survivors shared experiences of loved ones crossing lines disguised as tradition. There was pain in those posts, but also solidarity. It felt like a chorus rising raw and honest. I lay there in the quiet between notifications, feeling not overwhelmed, but anchored. Validation did not replace the ache of betrayal, but it steadied the ground beneath me. A gentle knock pulled me from my thoughts. The doctor returned, reviewed my scans, confirmed that there was no major internal injury, only bruising and concussion monitoring. He offered a soft nod, acknowledging more than medical data. Humans can read each other in silence. When he left, I held my phone loosely and whispered again my quiet mantra. Love is not ownership. I scrolled through thousands of supportive messages, fingertips brushing words like small lanterns, each one offering light. Then I paused at a comment that struck with simple force. You kept your dignity when he lost his. I breathed slowly, absorbing it. Dignity is not loud. It is steady. It stands without asking permission. Outside my hospital window, Charlotte's skyline glimmered under the winter sun, buildings rising steady against the blue, each one the result of design and grit. I imagined my penthouse, somewhere beyond the glass, still mine untouched, waiting. I would go home soon, not to hide, not to retreat, but to exist without shrinking, to reclaim the space I built brick by brick, not for a celebration or a spectacle, but as a sanctuary. The phone buzzed once more. A message request from someone with a verified checkmark. I opened it, expecting another journalist. Instead, it read simply, I saw you. I understand. You are not alone. No signature. No name. I set the phone down again. In a world glued to spectacle, sometimes quiet acknowledgement carries the most weight. I was not healed yet. The bruise still throbbed my heart, still bruised more deeply than my temple. But healing does not start with comfort. It starts with truth, and truth had found its voice. It traveled faster than tradition, louder than denial, and for the first time in a long time, I did not feel small. I felt seen. I left the hospital the next morning, head wrapped in a soft bandage beneath my hairline, the world looking sharper than it had before, as if the blow had knocked haze from my vision instead of clarity. A social worker handed me paperwork. A nurse reminded me to rest. The officer who took my statement nodded once when I walked past, the kind of nod that acknowledges both wound and courage. Outside, winter air stung lightly against my cheeks, grounding me. I did not call my father. I did not check family messages. Instead, I called a ride and gave one address with steady voice, home. My penthouse. The one I earned. When the elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, quiet greeted me like an old friend. The sun filtered across my hardwood floors, and I stood still for a moment, palm resting on the kitchen counter, breathing in silence like medicine. Not loneliness, freedom. Then I did something I used to avoid. I called a lawyer. I searched for someone who specialized in family power dynamics, financial coercion, reputation, warfare. Her name was Rebecca Lawson, a well-respected attorney in Charlotte known for calm expertise and quiet fire. Her assistant listened to my brief story, paused, then transferred me immediately. Rebecca's voice carried poise and precision, not pity. She asked concise questions about what happened at the event, the video, the hospital documentation, the no-contact notice already in place. Her silence after I answered was not uncertainty but calculation. She said, "Avery, you're doing the right thing. Let's make sure every step protects you and your property." I felt my breath loosen in my chest. Protect. Not negotiate, not smooth over. Protect. We scheduled a meeting that afternoon at her office in Uptown, and I spent the hours before it sitting on the living room rug, sipping ginger tea, feeling both exhausted and fortified. When I arrived at her firm, a sleek space with glass walls and soft lighting, she greeted me with a handshake firm enough to signal seriousness and gentle enough not to jar the bruise beneath my hair. She reviewed the hospital records, the police statement, the video evidence. She watched the clip without flinching, paused, rewound slowed frames. Then she set the phone down and said, "We will file 3 actions. First, a restraining order extension. Second, formal assault charges. Third, a civil suit for attempted property interference and coercion." Each word landed like a brick placed deliberately in a structure meant to stand. She slid forms across the table. I signed without hesitation, no tremor this time. She asked which outcome mattered most to me. I told her truth and protection. She nodded approvingly. Revenge fades. Protection restructures a life. I admired the way she spoke in stillness, not needing volume to command the room. When the paperwork was done, she explained the timeline. Police follow-up, court date to formalize protective order, civil filing, media inquiries. She told me her team would handle PR pressure and strategic statements if needed, not a spectacle, a boundary. On my way out, she placed her card in my hand. "If he reaches out in any form, call me. Do not respond." I nodded. Outside, the wind had picked up crisp and clean. My phone buzzed again with new messages, waves of support from strangers, still flowing articles circulating, commentators dissecting the clip. I turned the phone face down and let myself exist without noise. That evening, I did something I had postponed for years. I booked a therapy appointment. The idea of therapy once felt indulgent, as though pain needed justification or permission to be acknowledged. Now it felt necessary, like cleaning a wound properly instead of covering it and hoping it would heal unseen. The next morning, I sat in a soft chair in a quiet office scented with lavender. The therapist was a woman with kind eyes and steady posture, her presence gentle but unwavering. We spoke about control and duty, about childhood shaped around someone else's needs, about learning to confuse obedience with belonging. I told her that my father said loyalty means sacrifice. She asked, whose sacrifice? The question lingered in the air like incense. I swallowed hard. Mine, I said. Always mine. She nodded, not triumphant, but compassionate. That is not loyalty, Avery. That is conditioning, a life built on obeying to survive. You're changing the pattern. Change feels like fear before it feels like freedom. Her words ran through me like warm water thawing ice. She asked whether I felt guilt for choosing myself. I admitted I did, like a reflex I could not fully control yet. She said guilt is the echo of old obedience. It is not truth. Let it pass like weather. My fingers traced my mother's bracelet while she spoke. We talked about cycles and thresholds, about how leaving a family role is not betrayal, but reclamation. I left her office lighter, not healed, but grounded. That week paperwork moved like clockwork. Police follow-ups confirmed my father had been served. Rebecca called to review language for the civil filing. Words like coercion, ownership pressure, property intent, emotional manipulation. Terms that looked clinical but felt personal. My father's attorney attempted initial contact through Rebecca's office. She texted me, "We do not respond," Silence is our strength. Silence used to belong to him. Now it belonged to me. Each day I took small actions that felt like stitching a life back together. Watered plants, sorted mail, cooked dinner with soft music playing. Walked through my space and touched the beams. I sanded myself. The tiles I laid crooked once, then fixed the window ledge where I cried after my first promotion, the balcony where I once dreamed quietly, so no one could accuse me of ambition. Now I dreamed aloud inside my chest, and the world outside kept turning. Not always kind, but suddenly aligned with truth. News segments ran short clips of the video with headlines about boundaries, autonomy, and familial power imbalance. Lawyers on morning shows discussed legal rights and family conflicts. Reporters stood in front of the Duke mansion describing the surreal contrast between celebration and consequence. My name appeared in stories not as scandal, but as example. The surgeon stitching bruised dignity back into a narrative that had long belonged to someone else. Chloe posted once a simple photo of flowers with no caption. Comments flooded, some cruel, many empathetic toward her youth, but firm that entitlement has consequences. She did not reply. My father's business removed his listing from the leadership page. His image disappeared from event sponsorship banners. People who once praised him now paused before speaking his name as though reputation were dust slipping from grasp. One evening, Rebecca called. She said the court date for the protective order hearing had been set. She advised me what to bring, what to expect, how to carry myself. I said I planned to carry myself the same way I did on that stage. She laughed softly. Quiet strength is louder than shouting. Later, as night settled over the city and lights shimmered across the skyline, I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, feeling the air hum against my skin. Cars passed below like tiny stars in motion. A gentle breeze touched my cheek. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the city hold me. Not overwhelm me. Hold me. Healing is not dramatic. It is subtle. It is steady. It is choosing to unclench a fist that lived inside you for years. It is telling yourself you deserve peace even when old voices whisper otherwise. As I sipped tea, the therapist's words echoed again. Change feels like fear before it feels like freedom. Under the quiet sky, the fear softened. The freedom grew, and somewhere deep inside, a new truth rooted itself. This time, I was not moving against someone. I was moving toward myself. The courthouse sat in the center of uptown Charlotte like a monument to accountability, a building I had walked past many times without imagining I would ever stand inside, asking it to see me, to protect me, to validate what I had endured behind closed doors of elegance and expectation. The February air was sharp when I stepped out of the car that morning, scarf wrapped loosely around my neck, hair pulled back in a clean low bun, pearl studs in my ears like quiet armor. I held a folder against my chest, though I knew Rebecca had prepared everything. It was not paperwork I needed to hold, it was calm. The courthouse steps buzzed with low murmurs more crowded than I expected. Local journalists positioned near the entrance, their breath forming small clouds in the chill. A microphone from a Charlotte station pointed toward the door. I kept my eyes forward. Dignity walks, not rushes. When I entered the hallway outside the courtroom, I felt eyes shift toward me. Some familiar faces from the community board I once saw my father attend. People who used to praise him for his generosity. Now they held curiosity and a faint discomfort, as if realizing the man they admired had fractures they never bothered to see. Rebecca greeted me with a nod, a binder in hand, posture poised like someone who has built a career on truth measured calmly. She asked if I was ready. I took a breath that filled my lungs deeply and let it out slow. Yes. We entered. The courtroom was fuller than I imagined, rows of wooden pew-style benches lined with reporters, observers, and a scattering of society acquaintances who clearly came to witness whether the Monroe name would hold or crumble. I did not scan the room for my father. I did not need to see him to feel the tension. He arrived moments later, expensive suit, immaculate hair perfectly styled, the practiced half-smile of a man accustomed to charming his way out of consequences. But there was strain around his eyes, a tightness at his jaw. Silence settled heavy as he took his seat with his attorney beside him. The bailiff called the room to order, the judge entered, and proceedings began. My name spoken aloud felt heavier in this room, like a bell rung with intention, not obligation. The prosecution presented the incident, the medical records, the police statement. Then, the video. The room shifted as screens lit and sound clicked on. The shaky footage played large enough now that no one could look away. The ballroom. The stage. My father's arm around my shoulders like ownership disguised as affection. His announcement. The moment I refused. His face tightening. The push. My stumble into the column. My head snapping back. A collective gasp rippled across the courtroom. Some hands covering mouths, one journalist's pen pausing mid-air. Even though I had lived it, watching it enlarged, slowed by circumstance, not editing, felt surreal. It was not fury I felt. It was confirmation. Evidence wraps silence in truth. The screen froze on a frame where his hand pressed into my shoulder, fingers curled with tension. The judge leaned slightly forward, expression neutral, but eyes sharper now, interest intensified. My father's attorney stood beginning his attempt at reframing. He claimed misunderstanding momentum, unfortunate accident, heightened emotions in a celebratory environment. He used phrases like regrettable misinterpretation and father overwhelmed with pride. Pride. The courtroom air stiffened. My father sat still, trying to hold dignity like armor, but the cracks glimmered at the edges. Then the doctor testified. He described the documented injury, the visible bruise, the concussion symptoms, the importance of medical attention. He did not dramatize. He did not accuse. He stated facts with clinical clarity, and facts speak louder than performance. The nurse followed. Quiet voice, firm recollection. She recounted my demeanor, my hesitation to speak the whispered phrase, "You do not have to protect him." When she repeated it in court, a hush fell deeper than the earlier gasp. My father's jaw worked tightening like a knot. His attorney objected to irrelevance. The judge overruled softly. Emotional context is not irrelevance, it is impact. Then my father took the stand. He adjusted his tie, once a small tell. He spoke with practiced calm, attempting warmth. He insisted he loved both daughters, that he only wanted family harmony, that the moment was tragic and misunderstood. But arrogance has a scent, and the room could smell it. When asked directly whether he attempted to coerce me into signing over property, he phrased his answer carefully. I expected family support. Expected. A small word that revealed a worldview. The prosecutor pressed. He faltered, eyes flashing irritation before he smoothed his expression again. Then they asked about loyalty, his favorite word. He tried to soften it, but years of creed slipped through. Families do what is necessary for each other. Necessary. Another tell. The judge's eyes narrowed just slightly. Subtle, but unmistakable. Then the prosecutor asked if he laid hands on me. He paused a touch too long. His lawyer objected. Overruled. He answered that he was simply guiding me off stage. The video replayed silently behind him at that moment. Guiding looked nothing like the movement on screen. The courtroom saw it. Truth does not need volume. It needs contrast. When I was called to speak, I walked to the stand without rush. My heartbeat, steady breath anchored. I did not look at him as I passed. I did not need his acknowledgement. I spoke clearly. I described my upbringing without bitterness, only context. I said I was raised to believe obedience was love. I said boundaries were treated as betrayal. I said no one, not even parents, have the right to claim what someone else builds. When the attorney asked why I refused to sign, I answered simply, "My home is my life's work." When they asked how the push felt, I did not dramatize. I said it reminded me that silence can become permission if we are not careful. The courtroom listened with stillness so complete that the hum of overhead lights felt loud. Finally, closing statements. The prosecution spoke of autonomy, coercion, safety, of lines crossed in private that became visible only when exposed to light. My father's attorney emphasized reputation, legacy, misunderstanding. But legacy is not protection when truth becomes public. The judge called a recess and returned after a long half hour that stretched time like elastic. When she spoke, her tone held firm compassion and unwavering clarity. She acknowledged the complexities of family, the danger of power masked as care. She stated that physical force, regardless of intent or circumstance, crossed legal and ethical boundaries. Then she delivered consequences: a conviction for misdemeanor assault, mandatory counseling and anger management, a continued no contact order, oversight for any attempted communication. She paused, letting weight settle. Family is not a shield from accountability. Those who claim love must act in love. I felt my lungs fill with air that tasted clean. My father stared forward, face carved in stone, pride fractured, certainty dissolved. The gavel tapped once. Final, binding, real. When court adjourned, people stood slowly as if unsure how to step back into ordinary life after witnessing a narrative so often hidden behind elegant facades. I walked toward the hallway, steady pace, shoulders relaxed. Chloe stood there back against the wall, makeup smudged the glitter of her birthday crown, long gone. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her vulnerability replacing entitlement. She whispered, "I didn't know." Tears formed, but she blinked them back, pride and pain battling in her expression. I nodded once, not dismissive, but not indulgent. Understanding does not erase harm. She reached out, slightly unsure. I did not move toward her, but I did not turn away. She would have to find her own way to grow beyond illusion. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed, but I kept walking, guided by Rebecca's calm presence beside me. Reporters called my name, but silence was my chosen statement. Dignity speaks quietly. As we reached the exit, someone asked if I regretted pressing charges against my own parent. I stopped just long enough to meet their eyes and answer in a measured voice so steady it felt like steel. "Would you ignore harm from the person meant to protect you?" Their microphone lowered slowly. Outside, the world felt wide again. The sky clear, the wind carrying a sense of something new. I stood on the courthouse steps knowing one truth fully for the first time. Freedom is not given. It is chosen. And I had chosen mine. Would you have pressed charges even if it was your own parent? 3 months passed, and the city shifted from winter gray to spring. Brightness, dogwoods blooming along sidewalks, and the scent of new leaves drifting through open windows. I moved through those months not in triumph, but in stillness, rebuilding a life that had always been mine, yet never fully felt like my own. The court order held like a protective wall, silent but firm. I returned to work, not rushing, not grasping, just steady. My colleagues welcomed me back with warmth, but without invasive questions, the kind of respect that feels like a soft landing after a long fall. News coverage faded gradually, replaced by newer scandals and stories. Yet, every so often, someone would pause near me, recognition in their eyes, quiet admiration behind their nod. Support messages slowed from hundreds to a gentle stream, each one like a warm light flickering at the edge of my days. My penthouse, once a battleground in whispered threats and forced expectations, became sanctuary again. Each morning, I stood at the balcony railing, coffee warming my hands, looking over Charlotte's skyline as sun rose in soft gold over glass towers. Healing was not dramatic, it was measured. It was choosing to walk slowly around my living room with bare feet and letting gratitude settle heavy and calm. It was therapy every Thursday morning where I spoke not about him, but about me, about the pieces of girlhood swallowed to survive and the womanhood reclaiming space like spring reclaiming earth. Sometimes I sat on the rug by the floor-to-ceiling window and simply breathed. The world did not collapse when I did nothing. That truth alone felt like rebirth. People in my circle shifted. Some distanced, unable to handle discomfort or accountability. Others drew closer, offering consistent presence without pity. Friendship not anchored in crisis, but in quiet companionship. Chloe did not reach out in those first weeks. I imagined she was piecing her identity back together, confronting a truth she had never been forced to see. I did not resent her. I grieved for the girl who learned to equate privilege with love, pedestal with protection. It is a painful thing to realize the foundation beneath you was built from someone else's effort. I prayed she would one day learn effort for herself, not as punishment, but as liberation. As spring grew warmer, I noticed a shift in my reflection. Not hardness, not vengeance, just peace, edged with strength. My therapist once said that healing is when you no longer brace for a blow that is not coming. I was learning to set my shoulders down. Then one breezy April afternoon, I stepped into my building lobby grocery bag in hand, ready to take the elevator up and chop vegetables for dinner, a simple evening ritual that made my life feel planted. The doorman, usually relaxed, stood alert. His voice lowered as he said, "Miss Monroe, he's here." Before I could process, a familiar voice echoed softly from a corner. Avery. The name, once weapon and leash, now sounded like an old key that no longer fit a lock. My father stood there suit immaculate, though his face looked tired, pride, carved away by weeks of public silence and private reckoning. His posture, once towering, carried hesitation, now the weight of consequence-bending shoulders that once only carried entitlement. He stepped forward slow, as though approaching a startled animal. He said he wanted to talk to explain to fix things. He said he had lost donors, lost seats on boards, had been asked to resign from a foundation. He said people had turned on him unfairly, that he was painted as a villain by strangers who did not understand family dynamics. Family dynamics. The phrase made my ribs tighten. He said he regretted how things unfolded. Unfolded as if harm were an unfortunate accident and not a long line of intention. His voice cracked slightly when he said that he missed us, that family matters more than pride. He reached out a hand as though offering peace, but his palm hovered like a man unsure whether grace remained. The lobby seemed to shrink, security guard watching from the desk, residents passing through with sidelong glances, unsure whether to pause or hurry past the scene. My father took one more step, desperation mixing with a flicker of expectation, the old command rising beneath softened tone. He asked me to reconsider. He said a family like ours should not fall apart over misunderstandings. He said forgiveness was noble. He said appearances should not define us. He said he loved me. I let silence settle first, heavy as stone clearing space for truth. Then I spoke with the same calm I used on the stage months before, a calm sharpened not by fear, but by knowing. Family does not harm, and call it love. His lips parted as if I had struck him, though my voice held nothing sharp, only truth. He said he made mistakes but did not deserve to lose everything. My eyes stayed level with his. You did not lose everything. You lost control. There is a difference. His jaw trembled just slightly. He asked again softer if we could talk privately. The security guard stepped forward instinctively. I lifted a hand gently, signaling calm, then spoke low enough for only him to hear, but firm enough the lobby air felt still. I wish you healing. I do not wish you access. In that moment, something in him cracked, not pride, but the illusion that I could be swayed back into orbit around him. His eyes glistened, not with the softness of remorse, but with the sting of consequence. Security approached, not hostile, simply present. My father looked between us then at me, one last time. The old command in his gaze flickered and went out. He turned slow and walked toward the doors, shoulders smaller than I had ever seen. The lobby doors hissed open with a rush of spring air and closed behind him. Silence returned. I exhaled slow and deep, then nodded to security and walked toward the elevator grocery bag, rustling softly. When the doors shut and I was alone inside the mirrored walls, I saw my reflection not as a daughter cast from a mold, but as a woman shaped by her own hands. Upstairs, I unpacked vegetables and set a pot of water to boil. Healing is not cinematic. It is in the quiet routines reclaimed. As carrots hit the cutting board, my phone buzzed, a message preview from Chloe. I hesitated, knife resting flat against the wood, then opened it. Her text was short, unadorned, stripped of glitter and entitlement. I am sorry. I was wrong. I didn't see it. I hope you are okay. I read it twice. Youth can hide truth. Sometimes innocence masks participation. I typed slowly. Thank you for reaching out. I care about your future. I believe you can grow. But I need space. Boundaries are not punishment. They are safety. She replied only once. I understand. The pot on the stove began to simmer, soft bubbles, rising steam curling upward like breath released. I stood there, hands resting lightly on the counter, no tension in my body for the first time in years. Outside my window, the sky glowed pink against city glass. and the hum of traffic sounded less like noise and more like life continuing. Healing is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not about proving strength. It is about returning to yourself so fully that someone else's shadow can no longer claim space. And in that kitchen, chopping vegetables with quiet music playing in the background, I felt it. Completion. The morning sky washed my penthouse in pale gold, that soft first light hue that makes the world look cleaner, calmer, like everything has exhaled. Charlotte's skyline stretched beyond the balcony windows, towers catching sunrise like glass lanterns, and for a moment, I simply stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, coffee warming my palms, breathing in silence that felt earned. Healing, I learned, is not a finish line. It is a quiet layering of peace over old wounds until the world inside you feels like home again. 3 months had passed since the courthouse doors closed behind me, and in that time, I had built something new. Not loud, not vengeful, steady, certain, mine. I spent mornings like this often, not rushing toward productivity, but waking on my own terms. I worked, I cooked, I walked through neighborhoods under dogwood blossoms. I let sunlight fall on the parts of me that once braced for storms. And I dreamed, not in whispers, not in secret, but in clear daylight. One weekend in May, I hosted a small brunch in my building's garden courtyard, tables set with fresh flowers and soft linen. No pretension, just warmth. Women arrived one by one, neighbors, coworkers, acquaintances who had reached out after seeing the video survivors whose stories unfolded in quiet messages late at night. Some came alone, others arm in arm, some smiling, some nervous, all brave. I greeted each one with calm certainty, not pity, recognition. We filled plates with fruit and pastries and quiche, and conversations flowed not in trauma, but in triumph, in rebuilding, in laughter that felt like reclamation. A woman with silver hair and steady eyes told me she left a controlling marriage at 62 and planted her first vegetable garden the next spring. Another explained how her daughter helped her file for a restraining order against her brother after years of fear. We clinked glasses of orange juice toasted not to survival but to power. One woman squeezed my hand before leaving and whispered, "You gave a lot of us permission to choose ourselves." I shook my head gently. "You always had permission. The world just stopped standing in your way." After the brunch, I stood beneath the dogwood tree petals falling light as breath watching women walk into sunlight with their heads higher. Advocacy is not always protest. Sometimes it is a table set with care and a voice saying, "You are allowed to exist without fear." I started donating part of my monthly income to women's housing foundations in North Carolina. Silent, consistent, giving the kind that builds futures. One rent deposit, one safe bed at a time. I met with a local nonprofit about funding an empowerment program for young girls learning financial literacy and boundary setting, 2 things. No one teaches daughters who are expected to obey. I sat on panels about family coercion and economic autonomy, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof of possibility. Someone asked once whether I forgave my father. I answered honestly. Forgiveness is not forgetting harm. It is releasing the hold it had on your future. I do not wish him suffering, but I do not give him access. That distinction freed me. My therapist called it the difference between peace and permission. Many people conflate the two. They are not the same. On a warm Sunday evening, I stood on my balcony as the city lights flickered on one by one like constellations rising from the pavement. The breeze moved my hair gently. Charlotte humming in twilight, and I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the railing where I once stood, afraid to hope too loudly. Now hope sat beside me, steady as breath. In the glass reflection, I saw not the daughter trying to earn love through sacrifice, but the woman who finally understood that love never demands self-erasure. I remembered how my father said loyalty means sacrifice. But loyalty without respect is not loyalty, it is submission. Never again. My phone vibrated gently. A message from a woman in Ohio. I left my family's house today for the first time. Your courage helped me find mine. I pressed my hand to my heart, letting pride settle deep. Strength is contagious when shared with grace. I turned back into my apartment, dimming lights for evening cooking pasta with herbs on the stove, soft jazz floating through the rooms. My life was not loud now. It was solid, gentle, true. At night, I often sat on the edge of my bed with a journal and wrote a single line: I deserve peace. Not as mantra, but as record. A fact, a vow, a milestone. The next morning, sunrise spilled gold again across floorboards polished by years of effort. I stood in that light and whispered a truth that once felt impossible. I didn't lose a father. I freed myself. My voice did not tremble. It was steady, grounded, final, not in bitterness, but in liberation. And now I turn to you, wherever you are, whatever battles you've survived or refused to continue carrying for others. If you've ever had to choose yourself over family, tell me your city, where are you watching from?